If you want to win by any means necessary and make loads of money, do not follow this advice. But if you want to win in the most authentic way possible, then this is for you. Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. We're living in a moment where art and nearly all media is judged in seconds. You have to post more, you have to be more present, and more is expected of you as a creator. But with social media platforms effectively changing their algorithms to the point where we're not building our own silos anymore, we're all effectively competing for the same limited attention at all times. Despite this change, when it comes to making art or media in general, no one knows what will resonate. Not the platforms, not the audience, not even you.
Or me recording this video right now.
There's a chaotic element in this entire game that no one can really put their finger on, even after all this time. But that uncertainty isn't really a weakness, it's one of the most core components of making anything meaningful and putting it out into the world. In this video, I'll be breaking down a recent concept in philosophy called the veil of ignorance, and how it exposes an interesting contradiction at the heart of the creative process, and how we can harness what might seem like a weakness at first into a strength, and hopefully make our best work yet. So who am I and why am I talking to you about this today? My name is Sean, I'm a photographer, a digital artist, and a musician from Montreal. I spent most of my adult life creating art and putting it on the internet, and along this time I've been fortunate enough to work with some really interesting people and make some really cool projects for them and for myself along the way. Because of this, I've also developed a decent amount of experience maneuvering the internet as an artist and being an artist in the modern world in general. On the flip side, when it comes to philosophy, I am no expert, I will openly admit that. But I've engaged with the topic enough to know and believe that philosophy is something that more artists should be engaging with, even just a little bit. Considering the depth of the human experience and how thinkers from thousands of years ago or more recently thought about life, ethics, morality, or even making art can only help you and potentially benefit your art as well. Most people engage in philosophy in some way in their day-to-day lives, even if they're just talking about ethical decisions or moral decisions. They just don't realize it and they aren't using jargon, which is fine because I don't expect most people to have technical terms at their disposal and to understand the dense history of philosophy or anything like that. I don't either, to be fair, but I think the small amount that I do know has definitely benefited me in so many ways. A lot of big concepts from philosophy find their way into art and popular media, either intentionally or not. The most notable example of this is definitely The Matrix. The entire movie is basically just a technological reskinning of Plato's allegory of the cave, which is arguably one of the most popular concepts in philosophy. But let's not get carried away with that. We're here to talk about the veil of ignorance. Now, unfortunately, to my knowledge, there isn't anything that uses the veil of ignorance in the same way that The Matrix used the allegory of the cave, but it's a concept that's so simultaneously beautiful and simple to grasp that I immediately thought of the parallels between it and making art. So first, who came up with the concept, and more importantly, what is it? Well, while it's true that he's nowhere near as known as giants in philosophy like the ancient philosophers or even more modern philosophers who shaped our world like Nietzsche, Descartes, Kant, Simone de Beauvoir, or Marx, he's actually considered by many in his field as one of the most influential political philosophers of the 20th century. His name is John Rawls. He was an American philosopher working during the mid-20th century between the 1950s and the 1990s. He actually served in World War II and was inspired by the calamities of war and the bloodshed that he saw to focus on changing the social era that he lived in through his moral philosophy. He first wrote about the veil of ignorance in his book A Theory of Justice, which was published in 1971. Simply put, this is the concept in the thought experiment. Imagine you were tasked with creating the rules of a society. In this hypothetical, you're starting from what Rawls would call the original position, a time before social or economic frameworks are established. The challenge is this: how can you make things as fair as possible for everybody? To avoid as much self-interest or gaming the system as possible, this is where Rawls introduces the veil of ignorance, to safeguard against an individual stacking the deck for themselves or their people. The idea is to remove the possibility from its inception of the person gaming the system by blinding them of their place in the society, keeping you behind the veil of ignorance, essentially. If you knew from jump your position in the society after the rules had been set, for example, how wealthy you'd be, your ethnicity, what social status you have, your race, your gender, you'd be more tempted to game things in your favor to benefit the most from the rules that you yourself set. But if you're blinded from knowing your future position in the society, that is to say, working from behind the veil again, you're more likely to make it so that even the lowest rung of that ladder is doing well, because there's no guarantee that you won't be that person. As I mentioned earlier, it is a very simple concept, but it's very powerful at the same time. With this one perspective applied, it becomes very easy to filter ideas through and to establish what a good idea or a bad idea is to ensure that everybody can flourish, not just a select few. As an artist, I couldn't help but see the potential parallels between this and artistry. A relationship that I'm sure Rawls never considered, but I'm here to bridge that gap. So what's the artist's version of the veil? What parallels are there between everything I've just explained and making art? After all, we're not designing ethical frameworks or constructing a society, we're making art. But what if we could use this concept and help solve for something in a similar way, but as artists? When an artist is creating the work, in a very practical sense, they're already working from behind a veil of ignorance. As artists, when we finish an artwork and we put it out into the world, we have no idea of how it's going to be received or where it's going to end up. I'd argue that even the most accomplished artists that think they could see through the veil or something have no idea what they're talking about. Once in a while they might get lucky, but no one knows for sure what's going to happen with the art they make. How could you know how it'll resonate, how it'll affect how the rest of your work is seen? You don't even know how you're going to feel about it in the future. You might like it right now, but you might end up hating it down the line. Will you look back at this work and be proud of it and glad that you made it, or will you be embarrassed? And as frustrating as all of this is for artists, especially when you dedicate so much of your life to your craft, it's kind of a hot take, but I would say it's kind of for the best that you never know. In the same way that you'd be tempted to organize society to benefit yourself if you were making the entire society from the original position, but you knew how it would end up. If you knew how to make people like your art, I argue that that would taint the process. At that point, you would be creating explicitly to get a certain outcome, no longer for personal expression and pouring yourself into an artwork and hoping that someone might resonate with it. While there isn't anything inherently wrong with this, like as a law of the universe, I think it's not the best way to create. And this gets pretty close to a take that Rick Rubin has about art and commerce that I think is very relevant to this discussion. He breaks it down pretty nicely here.
If you go to the movies, so many big movies just not good. It's because they're not being made by a person who cares about it. They're being made by people who are trying to make something that they think someone else is going to like. And that's not how art works. Art doesn't, that's something else. It's not art, that's commerce.
The artistic veil becomes even clearer with all of this in mind. The veil that you're working behind in this sense is a tool to decenter yourself, to try to snap out of whatever model you have for the world that you're putting your work into, because 9 times out of 10, it's not accurate. An artist who becomes too focused on results or the potential reception of an artwork is trying to lift the veil in that sense, or trying to see through it. They're looking into the future and away from the present moment, which is the antithesis of being in the flow state of things, which is something we always strive to do as artists, to just be present with the work, make the best work that you can. The question is ultimately what you value as an artist and how you manage to balance those two perspectives. In my opinion, though, art is definitely the most honest and authentic when it's made without knowing or trying to intuit what will become of the art that you make. When you purposely place yourself behind the veil of ignorance and acknowledge it as a strength, not a weakness. If we create in a way that we aren't assuming that we'll be rewarded for our efforts and we just really show up earnestly and honestly to do the work, I think in the long run, you'll be a lot prouder of what you do. To put it simply, and to bridge the gap between Rawls and making art, Rawls is solving for fairness, and using this veil, or the artist's version of the veil, is solving for authenticity and making art that you're proud of, and kind of keeping the process as pure as possible if you want to do this for the rest of your life and to have a good relationship with making art. There's nothing wrong if you're making a piece that you want to make and hoping that will resonate with people, because that's a byproduct. It's not the focus. The focus is making something that you want to make. The issue for me is designing it from its inception in an almost artificial way to try to check as many boxes as possible and get it to resonate with people in a way that it isn't really about what you want to make. And doing this long enough and often enough, I'd say, makes you kind of cheat yourself out of one of the best experiences of being an artist and bringing your ideas to life. There have been so many artworks that I made that I really did think that would resonate deeply with people once I released them out into the world. But these pieces end up flopping, so to speak, or not doing anything, quote unquote, if you're using that very utilitarian view of what my art can get for me. Now, I personally love this piece, so I'm glad I made it, but this piece is an example of that. This piece is called Limbo, and it was a pretty arduous process to get this image because it's all done practically. I had a friend of mine laying on top of water with styrofoam underneath his arms so that he would float, and then I had somebody else swimming underneath him with flashlights wrapped in multiple Ziploc bags, pointing up at him, and we drove out into a lake, so there's particles in the water. It would give this nice color, and I was shooting it basically with a flashlight pointing at my friend as well, lying on the top of the water and shooting with one hand. It was just uncomfortable for everybody, but all that to say, I love this piece, but it didn't do anything for me in the grand scheme of things. Meanwhile, this piece that I made in 2014 is like my most popular image I've ever made, and I had no idea at the time that it would kind of stand the test of time and be that popular and do so much for me. It went semi-viral on Tumblr and Instagram a few years ago, and at this point, it's definitely still my most popular image, which is both really cool and also a bit frustrating because I feel like I've made better pieces since, like any of these. It's also worth saying that it's hard enough to make a good piece of artwork, so you might as well go into it making something for yourself that you'll feel good about, because at least that way, if it fails, you'll still feel good about it and be proud of it. There's also a lot of benefits in general of operating behind the veil or purposefully acknowledging this and being okay with it and embracing it, if anything. There's way less pressure for one artwork to do something for you. If it doesn't do something for you, then you move on to something else that you want to make. You're just making it and hoping it resonates, and if it doesn't, on to the next. You'll also go into making the piece from a more level-headed perspective as well, because there's a lot of pressure if you think that this artwork is going to resonate and there's a lot of potential here and I don't want to mess up that potential. Like you're tainting the process before you haven't even started. And I can speak from that because I do this constantly, not necessarily thinking that people will like this, but more in the sense that this piece has so much potential. If I don't do it properly, all the what ifs will get to you. Embracing the uncertainty of like operating from behind the veil as well also makes for a way more sustainable practice, because you're way less likely to burn out if you're not worried about the expectations of others. You're doing what you want to do. It'll obviously be disappointing if a piece that you really like doesn't resonate with people, but at the end of the day, the goal of making the piece was not to move the needle necessarily. It would have been great if it did, and you're going to try again, but you're not going into it tainting the process from jump. I would argue that this approach also fosters a better environment for you and your audience, or your following if you have one. If you're making something that you don't even really want to make, but you're making it because you think others will like it, but then they don't like it, like resentment is going to build in that environment. But if you drop something and others don't like it, it doesn't really sting as hard because you weren't doing it for their approval. You can still be disappointed that it didn't resonate, but you can offset that by the pride of making something that you wanted to make. I would say arguably the biggest benefit of operating from behind the veil and embracing the ignorance of not knowing how your art will be received is that it makes you process oriented and not results oriented. It makes you way more likely to want to keep showing up and make art more and more. If something good happens, then they're happy surprises. It wasn't what you're going for, but great. If nothing good happens, or even something bad happens, I would say that the fall would be less bad because you weren't going into it with such high expectations from jump. It's also worth saying that creating from a more authentic and genuine place isn't a guarantee of anything. You're not going to make better work because you do this or anything. It's really just for yourself and perfecting your inner model of how you want to make art. The only goal in all of this is to focus on your intentions and your process, the things that are ultimately in your control. It's very normal to make something that you're not really that into in the hopes that something will resonate with people. But I'd say even if it does, that level of resonance will not make you feel as good as if you had made something that you really wanted to make. Because when that happens, people are resonating with the deepest parts of you. They're not resonating with something that you sent out hoping people would like it. There is another elephant in the room that needs to be addressed when it comes to the veil of ignorance and all of these things and making things honestly and authentically. Money. I'd love to tell you that focusing on working from behind the veil of ignorance and embracing that ignorance and that uncertainty will result in objectively good art that everyone will resonate with, and you're going to make 6 figures every year, and everyone's going to love you, and everyone's going to love your art, everyone's going to think you're amazing, and everyone's going to write what you think your books. You and I both know that that is obviously not the real world. You've got rent or a mortgage to pay, groceries, bills, limited time, all very real concerns that need to be dealt with, and being authentic doesn't necessarily pay the bills. In fact, it often doesn't at all. This tension between wanting to stay authentic and make work that you want to make while also paying bills is kind of brutal, and it pushes us to want certainty. This is the appeal to trying to lift the veil and to try to intuit from the ether some kind of world where you know exactly what people like. And I understand it. It's very normal to want to attach certainty to something that is very uncertain by nature, but it's kind of a fool's errand. In a lot of ways, that's why I respect people that have day jobs, because they're playing a different game. They're not trying to make the thing they love also make money. They're just making what they want to make and making money somewhere else. So that way the two aren't clashing. You keep them in different silos, they're less likely to interfere with each other. And I'm sure a lot of people with day jobs want to make art their main thing, but it's less of a pressure if you know you have money coming in versus if you're somebody that just wants to be authentic and honest, but also make money. The challenge for those of us who want to make art that is very authentic to us and also make money is a really difficult balancing act. On the one hand, you focus on your craft. On the other, you have to focus about your finances. Creating authentic work while also creating financial systems that will allow you to keep creating in the long run. For some, that means freelancing, part-time work, full-time work, teaching, or finding creative ways to monetize without compromising your voice. It's not selling out to take care of yourself and ensure that you've got enough in the bank to make art every day and make work that you're proud of. There are a lot of ways that you can monetize your art in authentic ways that don't feel cringy. You can sell prints of your work, you can license your work for projects, you can take on and seek out creative commissions. There's so many options. I've been very fortunate over the years to be able to sell prints of my work and license it as well and do commissions and things like that. And I'm incredibly proud of a lot of these things. And while it might not always add up to what you want it to be at the end of the year, it really depends on what you're doing. Are you trying to make the most money, or are you trying to build a way that you can do what you love doing and making enough money to get by and maybe put some aside? All of this only matters if you really value self-expression and being genuine with your art. If the extent of your artistry and your endeavors with art is just to make money and get followers or build an audience online, this is probably the last video you should be watching. So if you're here, I'm genuinely surprised. And to those who have made it this far and appreciate the video and this kind of message in general, I hope you consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video, and leaving a comment letting me know what you think. It's been a while since I've made a video and I'm trying to get back into it, so I hope you're enjoying this so far. Jim Carrey actually gave a commencement address at a university a few years ago that's very relevant to this conversation, and I had to include this into this video.
My father could have been a great comedian, but he didn't believe that that was possible for him. And so he made a conservative choice. Instead, he got a safe job as an accountant, and when I was 12 years old, he was let go from that safe job, and our family had to do whatever we could to survive. I learned many great lessons from my father, not the least of which was that you can fail at what you don't want, so you might as well take a chance on doing what you love.
All that time you could have spent trying to win doing something authentic and doing something that you'll cherish on your deathbed was spent doing something that you might not even like that much and might not even resonate with other people. So if you have an opportunity to try, you might as well try for yourself, not for others. So that way at the end of the day, you can stand by your choices, you can stand by the work you've made and know that you're proud of it, even if it doesn't resonate. So to sum everything up, in the same way that John Rawls' veil of ignorance encourages fairness, embracing the veil that you stand behind as an artist can help you prioritize authenticity and making the best art you could ever make. No matter how much success you might collect in your lifetime, you will likely never crack the code of what makes something good. It can be fun to try and fail, but it's also kind of fun to stay ignorant. That's all for now. If you'd like to check out some of my art or my music or my other videos, you can find them all in the description below. Thanks so much for listening. Take care and see you in the next one. See you.